Hello everyone. I wanted to start doing a video series focusing on certain players in the metal genre that have really made a name for themselves in terms of getting their personality across as musicians and not just instrument players. As we've talked about on this channel, there is a lot of instrument players out there in the metal genre right now, but not a whole lot of musical artists, and that didn't always used to be the case. In the 90s and the 80s, every player kind of had their own signature traits. They all kind of sounded different from each other. They were still tied together by what metal is, and that's great. You want to have that thread that links us all together, but at the same time, you could put on a record from any number of these players, know immediately who they are, and that's not what you get out of modern music, not out of modern metal. So the first player that I want to look at is Robert Vigna from Immolation. Immolation was my first ever death metal show, and it really did kind of define who I am as a person in a lot of ways. And I was presented with my first exposure to the band had been here and after I had bought it and then went to this show. So I was familiar with what they did, but the environment of the show, the environment of what death metal is, me starting to realize what it is and understand it, it was really formative for me in terms of developing myself as a person, and it was a great introduction to guitar, to death metal guitar, from Robert Vigna, knowing that there are artists out there that can encapsulate that metal attitude, still present it to you in a way that is indicative to just them as players, and present you a whole different world of exciting musical ideas that you had not been previously familiar with. So I wanted to start with him. Throughout the course of this video, I want to show where he started from. We're going to look at Into Everlasting Fire a little later, and I want to showcase, we're going to start with Here and After, Nailed to Gold, my first exposure to the band, and then we're going to end with where they're at now, which I'm not a fan of. I think that they've kind of cheapened who they are as a band, and it's a shame because it still does sound like Immolation, but it just does not feel very inspired. And throughout the course of this video, I hope to show you all what made Immolation an important band, what made Robert Vigna an important player, and also show that there are certain strengths and attributes that he has that are still resonating, even though their material is compositionally much weaker now. But as you can see, I have a little bit of a different setup now. My girlfriend got me this hilarious, adorable mic that I think lends itself pretty well to my pretentious asshole personality on this channel. And hopefully you can hear me a little bit better. There's been a few complaints that you can't hear what I'm saying. And we're still going to have that shitty quality where I'm going to be playing a video and reacting to the video. It's the only way I can think of where I can get around YouTube censors, where they'll take the video down if I showcase anything that's actually part of their channel without capturing it in this way. So if you have hints with that, let me know, but make it pretty simple, because when it comes to computer editing, I am definitely not all that great at it. But so we're gonna start with Nailed to Gold live from the Here and After record. This was my introduction to death metal. This was my introduction to Immolation and what this style of music can be. And as a intro to what this kind of music can be, it really did set the bar awfully high. It's a very adventurous song. It's a musical statement where you get an idea of who this band is. You get an idea of who Robert Vigna as a player is. His signature tropes are all there on display. His command of the material is very strong, and it does not feel like he's trying to convince you that he's a great player. He is showing you, based on the strengths of his construction, that he is a great player. So we're going to be looking at that with Nailed to Gold.
This one is called Nailed to Gold.
So let's just talk about that first riff for a second. It's a barrage. It's a whirlwind, and hearing that on record with the production that it had, it's very low end, not a lot of mid range to the guitar, and you could really get lost in the notes that are being played. If this were made now, if Here and After was made now, the mids would be super pushed, and that evil aspect of what metal guitars used to sound like would be completely gone. But what's happening in this riff, like I talk about the light and the dark contrast a lot. You hear this kind of barrage of a low series of notes that's kind of chromatic and really hard to grab onto, and then you have this high note that ends the phrase that really kind of jars you. That's kind of a Immolation staple, and a lot of bands do it, but you'll see Immolation definitely do that a lot in terms of whether or not they're gonna end the phrase in a pinch harmonic. That happens a lot as well, but for the most part, they're going to have their riffs start with the open E string. Well, theirs is an open C string, and then they end up getting that nice contrast where you feel like there's a huge dynamic shift between the first notes of the riff and the end. But then they go into like a pre-verse riff that's just totally like full throttle, and once again on the actual Here and After record, it's really hard to tell what's going on, but the vibe of the music, the atmosphere of the music really takes you there. So before this is what I would consider the chorus riff. The riff beforehand ended on a very jarring tremolo picked chord, and now we're going to look at what Immolation does now at the very end of this, and they don't have that kind of adventurous tonality really anymore. A lot of what they're doing now is either going to be power chord based or tritone based, and that's effective language in the metal umbrella for sure. But what they were playing here sounds to me like an augmented fifth. It's that one note higher than a power chord, and when used in the right formula, that can be really abrasive, even more abrasive than what you can get out of a tritone, depending on where it lands in your melody. But what I really like about this chorus riff is they went from a very like melodically dissonant beginning of the song to a very melodically consonant chorus, at least as consonant as a band like Immolation can be. And what I extra like about it is it's more pronounced on the record, and I think that on the record it was the result of guys that are not fully refined in their instrumental prowess, but there is this like rhythmic drag to the end of the phrase where it does not resolve naturally in terms of tempo. Everything that you're predicting about when the one is going to hit is totally out the window for this chorus riff, but it adds this sense of drama that really you're not going to get in a modern recording where everything is snapped to a grid. The metronome is dictating where the natural rhythm of the band is going to land. You're not going to feel that really anymore. And this is not the same drummer, but he is trying to emulate that kind of that lilty feel where it really is dragging. I watched a video of them playing this song in 97, and they had tried to correct that tempo mistake, and it really did take away a lot of that kind of dramatic feel, because when that one hits again, it really does just feel like you've climbed a mountain every time. And when they play the guitar solo over it, when they bring the riff back, it really is just such a dramatic flourish that you really don't see happening in a lot of metal bands. But we're going to listen to the rest of this chorus riff. another kind of signature Bob Vigna trait is a lot of bands in metal will use artificial harmonics, usually to like end a phrase or to give you that sense that they're leaping out of like the where they're resting comfortably tonally, and they will do it to actually give the melody a little bit more flavor by doing pull-offs mid artificial harmonic, which is, it's a kind of a weird it's a weird trait, because when you do that, a little bit of the natural note comes through on the guitar, but you still hear that squeal of the harmonic underneath, and it kind of has this like weird blasphemic quality that I can't really put my finger on, but I really like the use of it here, because it's not just a jarring high note that you hear, it's actually a fully constructed part of the melody. So let's continue with it. So once again, we're getting a really nice use of those artificial harmonics, and this band is known for having like wailing guitar phrases in their solos and in their riffs in general. Like, you really do hear that wailing kind of atmospheric thing that they're doing that really gives itself a little bit more of that tapestry that you don't get in a lot of riffs right now. A lot of the modern style, it doesn't utilize space. It's just a flurry of notes that are all within the same kind of rhythm. It's like constant 16th notes. This he gives a lot of space to that artificial harmonic, and that bend he's putting on it really it allows itself to dominate the phrase, and it's a signature. You're going to remember that riff, forever once you hear it the first time. And we don't have a whole lot of memorable things happening in modern metal today. So what I want to bring up right now during this solo, there's a phrase happening under the solo that hasn't been heard yet in this song, and it's about to give way to that chorus riff again, and the climax of the guitar solo against that chorus riff is really one of, in my opinion, one of the best examples of a huge dynamic climax in death metal. It really doesn't get much better than this to me, and the band is still utilizing that same kind of that rhythmic lilt, where they actually like make the phrase feel longer than it is, and Bob is still staying on with his solo, and the solo is kind of like Slayer-esque at the beginning. There's not a whole lot of melody to it, and then at the end, when that chorus hits, which as we know is kind of a consonant phrase, the solo kind of mutates into a very consonant solo, very triumphant sounding, and it really is just a great example of showcasing your command of knowing how to manipulate tonality to give those different kind of flavors to the audience. Showcase that you can harness that kind of discordant melody. You can harness that kind of consonant melody, and when you bridge them together in the climax of a song, you really do have a winning formula, and that's something I really do wish I saw more of in modern music. Yeah, it's one of my favorite metal moments right there. Is that's the end of that solo in this particular song in this particular record. I just love how it comes together. But yeah, we're gonna move on to another song I really like. A record not a lot of people talk about. I really do like "Failures for Gods," the follow-up to this one. It's got Tupperware drums. It sounds weird. The band was really kind of getting their feet wet on having their arrangements a little bit more consolidated to the point where they did kind of resemble a little bit more of like that pop kind of arrangement, which is a shame. We're going to look at into Everlasting Fire in a bit, and the arrangement for that song it's on their first record. It's way more bananas in terms of like trying to get your grasp on what you're feeling here. The band definitely streamlined what they were doing, but I still think that Failures for Gods is a very effective record in terms of like giving you what Immolation is about, but streamlining the arrangements enough. And there's still some pretty crazy stuff happening on the record. I've listened to it a lot this week. There's some adventurous stuff, but it does get a little bit more focused on getting you to remember some of the vocal cadences against really short phrases of guitar. The band does utilize phrasing really well. One of the traits of the band that I've seen is you'll see a lot of their riffs be in like a 6/8 thing, where it's just really short and it's kind of anthemic, and they'll use that when they want to have vocal placement. And Ross's vocals over a phrase like that will have like the typical Glenn Benton delivery, where it's just really short, syncopated outbursts that will get stuck in your head. But when they want to have a break away from the vocals, they'll have this really long tangential musical part where it really showcases that when they want to lead the audience on a journey, they know that they have to take a break from the vocals to do that. They know that they need to take a break from really short phrasing and give you the sense that you're really being led somewhere. And then when the vocals come in again on a lot of Immolation songs, the phrasing gets shorter. So they know how to command the audience. They know when it's time to have the vocals be the focus, the phrases get shorter. When the vocals need a break, the phrases get longer, and the song takes on more of a sense of identity that way. You don't see a whole lot of that either. That's careful planning and composition, and you don't really see that so much in a lot of modern bands. So let's look at Once Ordained.
It's a pleasure to be back here as always. You guys always treat us right. You always come out and support. We appreciate it. Off the Failures for God's album, Once Ordained.
So this is the same. This mirrors the same kind of aesthetic that they used on the first track of Here and After, where it's a barrage of lower notes, lower registered notes that it's hard to grasp onto, and then it ends in a higher note that kind of jumps out of the tonal registry that you're used to, and you hear a lot of that in like Demolic. That's a common thing. In this case, they're using that artificial harmonic again. But if you were to, this is like the only video I could find of the song where you could actually hear what's going on enough while seeing what's going on. Nobody's covered this song, unfortunately. But the beginning of the riff is a lot more discernible than what was going on in Here and After. You could feel that the band is kind of steering themselves in a more melodic direction on this record. And it's totally fine. It doesn't bother me one bit that they're kind of losing a little bit of that sense of being lost in the melody, because it's all the more immediate. Sometimes when you want to make a statement, you have to be immediate, and I could tell that the band was kind of getting more comfortable with who they were as performers and as musicians in general, like with their command of the material, where they were just like thinking probably that they did not want to mislead the audience by having them try to stumble through their melodic phrasing, but instead give you a melody that you can hum. And Failures for Gods is full of that. It's a very memorable record. So let's continue with the song. There's a few things that they do in this song that I think is uniquely characteristic of the band, and I want to focus on that. So this all has that 6/8 feel that I was telling you about. And what I like about the melody that's going on here is that to me it sounds like it's harmonized in fourths, which is like if you're playing a guitar that's not drop tuned, it would just be like a flat finger on the lower two strings. And that kind of harmony you don't hear a lot of anymore. It's all over a record like Broken Hope's Loathing. And it's I'm not going to say it's anti-melodic, but if you think about harmonies, usually you're going to gravitate towards like the Gothenburg sense of it within the metal umbrella. That kind of Iron Maiden-y kind of harmony. If you're going to take the melody and make it straight fourths as your harmony, it's way more like percussive sounding than a natural harmony would be, and it just has this sense of being more rooted in power than rooted in melody. It's something that you don't hear a whole lot of anymore, and it's a trait I really do kind of miss in metal. So you see how I was talking about when they want the vocals to be the showcase, they deliberately shorten their musical phrase. That's what you saw here. In this part of the song, the vocals are the most memorable thing, and they definitely wanted them to be the showcase, so they shortened the phrase. And before that, you had this really melodic that part in fourths that I was telling you about. That's probably the most melodic part of the song, in terms of just being like a single note phrase that really, it's kind of longer and flowing, and then they break into this kind of percussive phrase where there isn't really a whole lot of melody used, but it does end in a harmonic, which is the typical Immolation standard. So you do get that contrast between the light and the dark, but the vocals are the main part of the phrase here, the main focus. And the band is at this point of the song, at this point of their career, showcase that they can really dictate where your attention needs to go based on the preference that they show in the phrasing, in the focus of whether or not the guitars are up front and center, the focus on whether or not the vocals are front and center. And that command it's confident. And what I don't hear in a lot of modern music right now is that sense of confidence where they know exactly what they're doing, and they're not just trying to show you that they can play circles around you, but they're gonna take you on a journey, and your focus will be commanded based on what they're dictating, instead of it just kind of being a background tapestry of scale runs and empty melodic phrasing. That's not what's going on in Immolation and other bands of the like. So what I want to look at now is the song Into Everlasting Fire from the first record. And after that, we're going to look at a guitar playthrough from a song on the most recent record. And the reason I want to do that is to show kind of how the band really presents themselves a little bit more limited in terms of melodic choices. As for this song in general, if you're going to, a lot of people confuse Immolation and Incantation. And if there was a time to do it, this would be the time period. There's a lot that's going on in this song that I could definitely hear happening on older Incantation records. And to me, they hadn't really found their footing in terms of their own personal voice, really, until Here and After. There's glimpses of it here, and the style is kind of set up here. But that confidence that I was mentioning earlier of how to direct the audience and how to utilize your phrasing and melody to kind of take you on a journey hasn't really been fully set up here. There is a sense of structure here that echoes what Immolation kind of becomes later, where I wouldn't say there's a defined chorus, but there are repeating parts enough where you do have that sense of structure where they're trying to separate this song from other songs in the same record, but there isn't any real anthemic parts that I can recall happening on this record, not so much as what you would hear on, say, Failures for Gods or their material afterwards, but that compositional structure is here, but the parts seem to have equal value. There's nothing that really builds upon the neighboring riff next to it, where it seems like that riff has to be there in order to give itself the value of where the song should naturally flow. That being said, there is some melodic structuring happening in here within the riffs themselves that are a lot more adventurous than where the band is currently residing. And it's kind of a shame because you shouldn't see a band place limits on themselves late in their career, but it's kind of inevitable. It seems like it happens to everybody. But what you're going to see here is a lot more kind of chromatically mystifying riffs, where later Immolation is a lot more consonantly melodic, where you can really hum the melodies. With this, there's a lot more of that sense of being lost within a melody, where the notes being more chromatically based don't really have any value over any other notes in the phrase, so you really kind of do get lost in it a little bit. But that's kind of what a signature of death metal is. It's that sense of defiance of musical convention, where in place of having that really anthemic chorus, you have these the chromatic melodic devices that you end up getting lost in, and that's something I do enjoy a lot in death metal, and you don't really hear a lot of anymore. But let's have a look at the song, and I'm probably not going to play the whole thing, but just show you a couple of the riff devices going on in here, and then we'll move on to their most recent output. So that does have kind of a hummable quality to it, but at the same time, it's very chromatically based, where there's nothing that feels where it has that kind of character that is going to denote a real melodically consonant character. You're not going to get that from a phrase like this. This is more along the lines of what you would hear on like an Incantation record, or on like Soulside Journey from Darkthrone, where the notes kind of they lose that sense of inherent value because they're so anti-melodic, and that's fine, because it gives itself a new character that you don't hear in a lot of conventional music. And I do like that. I do like that sense of purposely trying to mislead the audience. It does show that they still had that idea about them where they wanted to control the focus of the listener, but at the same time, there's not a whole lot of sense of this riff has to be in this part of this song, because the melody is so kind of disjunct. But we'll continue with it. What I like about what's going on in the riff like this is that they're using those high notes that are at the end of the phrase in a way where they naturally are out of the dynamic range of kind of a lot of the previous notes of the riff. So you do kind of get that same kind of feeling that they showcase at the beginning of Nailed to Gold, for example. But it's not nearly as jarring. But if you were to take a lot of those higher notes and drop them an octave to where the rest of the riff is kind of laying out, you'll see that the actual phrase is not really that tonally dynamic. But by taking a few notes out of that register, bringing them up an octave, you get a lot more of a dynamic range. So it's nice to see that they're presenting that light and dark contrast this early in their career, which is later going to become kind of a focus on how they structure a lot of their riffs. So it kind of has a pretty basic, after the first riff, which doesn't really, at this point at least, hasn't come back, you kind of have an ABC kind of arrangement, which is fine, but it's not, it's at the same time a little more adventurous than what they do currently, but also kind of limiting. It's not like your Suffocation style arrangement where there's not a whole lot of repetition of parts, but at the same time, the song does have a characteristic to the riffs themselves where they feel like they're tightly knit in a way where none of the parts feel like they don't belong. But there's one more riff coming up that I want to look at after this, and then we'll move on to what's going on with current Immolation. So once again, utilizing that artificial harmonic to take the guitar out of a register. And if you look at what's going on in this phrase, you'll see that it's very chromatic in nature. They do have that minor third kind of hammer-on that is kind of the signature of the phrase. You hear that a lot in Cannibal Corpse. They kind of abused it. But it does have that sinister kind of melody to it. But at the same time, the riff itself is amelodic in the sense that it's very chromatically based. And they did bring you that harmonic to show you that, well, we can feel that you're probably getting lost in the value of these notes, so we're going to just assign one of the notes to be really outside of that dynamic range, and that's an Immolation staple. But when we get to the part that's over the solo, I'm not going to focus on it because there's a lot more I want to get to. But the phrase of it is it's a lot longer than you would anticipate it being, which is the same kind of feeling you got in Incantation's Golgotha over their solo, which was the same kind of pacing. It was like your 16th note phrase, but that one was a count of 9, and this one it's not. I don't think it's 9, but it's a lot longer than what you would anticipate. You would probably naturally want to fall on like a multiple of 4, or most likely 8. But this one it's way longer than you anticipate. And when a phrase becomes that long, you wind up forgetting where the 1 is, and then you get that sense of being lost in the melody, which is a death metal trait that I do enjoy, and you don't hear a lot of too much anymore. But as for this song in general, there is stuff going on that showcases who Immolation is. It's not fully refined, but it is a band making a statement, and you could still hear what Robert Vigna is doing. You could still hear that it's him, which is nice to know that he was able to showcase who he is early on in his career, refine who he is, and still have those signature things that make him a legitimate musical artist. So let's move on to their most recent output. So I don't enjoy newer Immolation. I kind of fell off after Unholy Cult, which I thought was a very good record, but I'll always keep going back to say like Here and After. That's my favorite output of theirs. But this kind of material that they're doing, it really feels like they're treading water to me. And we're going to look at the whole arrangement of the song to kind of showcase why it's falling flat, at least in the arrangement wise, in my opinion. But it's still Immolation. It's undeniably Immolation, but they have found the formula, and they're utilizing the sound of what Immolation is, but not so much a lot of that structuring. They're being a lot more drawn into the idea of how they want their choruses to lead where the focus of the song goes, which was hinted at early on in their career, but it was never really the focus of the band. And here they don't really have a lot of those long tangential riffs that I brought up before, that in between vocally focused riffs they would utilize to give you the feeling that you're on some kind of journey with them. A lot of the phrasing here is going to be very succinct, and it's going to lead directly into more catchy parts that are vocal based. And you'll see here that a lot of the guitar structuring, a lot of the melody it's just a lot more juvenile, I feel. And when you've been doing this for so long, and you have these characteristics that define you as a band, define you as an artist, I would like to think that you wouldn't put yourself in a box, sell yourself short. But as we know, every artist tends to do it. This is a little sadder to me because Immolation felt to me that it was built on having this kind of style that was inherently abrasive and inherently rebellious, but they're just kind of falling in line here. And I'll show you why. So that's something that if you've watched these videos, you know that that's something I do not enjoy seeing. When you have to take your rhythm section out in order to stitch your song together. It's a trope that has happened in metal forever, but in this case, the band has given themselves that A-B arrangement, and then they wanted to go somewhere else. And in order to get there, they dropped out the rhythm section and introduced a new melodic idea that, if they had continued to use that rhythm section there, would have wound up feeling disjointed. And when you get rid of that rhythm section, you can kind of make anything work. It's really kind of a cheap idea. But let's talk about the riffs themselves. As you can see, they were way simpler as opposed to what you heard in, say, Here and After, or any of those records. They're simple, they're anthemic, they're very basic, and it's not adventurous at all. I understand wanting to lead the audience, but to me, they got carried away with it, and now they're thinking more about the audience, or maybe Vigna is thinking about riffs that he could easily swing his guitar to. I don't know. It's a cheapening of what the band should represent. But we'll see where they go from this next riff. So, another very, very simple phrase, and later on he applied, it's octave based, so you get a sense of power from an octave. If you don't want to rely on having single notes dictate your phrase, and you're not going to be tremolo picking it, it's natural to want to use an octave in its place. And the harmony is in fifths, which is nice. It's that power chord harmony that is a metal staple. But it's such a basic riff. This song is essentially pieced together with, like, I don't know, Junior's first death metal riffs. This isn't the kind of material that a band with like a 30-year catalog or whatever they have at this point should be spitting out. So what I want you to focus on is that guitar that's up in the corner there, the rhythm guitar. The solo is fine. It's your typical wailing Robert Vigna solo, but the guitar underneath it, and what Immolation has always done is whenever there's a guitar solo, there's going to be a new phrase under it. This is the first time you're hearing this phrase in the song, but the actual melody to it, very simple, and it's in your eighths. Which is the natural rhythm that you're going to be looking for, as opposed to, say, Into Everlasting Fire, where under the solo is a phrase where you get lost in the count. So when you do get lost in the count, it does enable you to focus more on the solo over it. To me, what's going on with the rhythm under it is it's really just kind of a piecemeal riff that they threw in there so they have an excuse to solo over it. And it's one of those devices that I'm just not a fan of seeing. So when you're relying on that open C to be either the start or the end of a lot of your phrases, you can get away with leading into whatever riff had done it before, and they're going back into that initial verse riff, which is nice. You want to see themes reappear in a song. It's a good way to stitch your song together in a way where you know that this song is comprised of parts that could only belong to this song. But here, I think it's the result more of laziness than of a structural necessity. When I went ahead with the ABC arrangement again. Same arrangement you saw into Everlasting Fire, but this one just feels to me, at this point, if you're going to utilize that sense of arrangement, you're going to have to, they've had 30 years to hone it, come up with a new way to stitch your song together where it doesn't feel so piecemeal. Those were a couple of throwaway riffs, in my opinion, and then you have the rhythmic dropout again. It's just it's uninspired to me. So the song fades out on that. So as you can see, there just isn't a whole lot going on in this type of material. The band is trying to coast on the aesthetic of what their sound is, and less on what is actually the compositional elements of the riffs. They've never been a band. If you listen to Immolation, they've never been a band where the structure has those moments where you really feel that there is a huge artistic statement being displaced or being placed here. What you end up getting from the best of Immolation is in the strengths of the riffs themselves, and the riffs just are not good here in terms of character, originality. What I like to hear a lot of in riffs to give them that sense of thematic cohesion is you'll hear segments of the part that in a microcosm have like rhythmic shifts where it'll be like a triplet here, and then the melody underneath will mutate in a way, and then the riff from start to finish kind of ties itself up in a way where you have a start and conclusion that feels natural and not just a series of notes with no value to it. That description is maybe not very good. I wish there was a better way that I could kind of get that point across to you, but you'll hear in a really well thought out Immolation riff from the past that they had clusters of notes that had more resolution to them, either rhythmically or melodically, than what's going on here. What's going on here is more, they figured out how to sound like Immolation and give you phrases that will get that aesthetic across, but there isn't much thought, not only in the arrangement, but in the construction of the riffs, and that's where their strengths always were. So it's really a shame to see that that's kind of where they're kind of settling right now. But what you can see from this material, you still see what Robert Vigna is all about. You'll see that you'll have that dynamic light and dark shift. A lot of the material here was more reliant on the power of the octave. You see that in the beginning riff of the song. but there is that sense of drama there that you get from Immolation. There is that sense of power you get from the open C leading the phrase and then having the octave dictate where the melody lands. And you do have phrases where there are a lot of artificial harmonics being used, like that one that the song faded out on. That one it has a lot of that artificial harmonic placement in it that is more note-based than squeal-based. You know, you'll hear it, like if you want to think about artificial harmonics, if you don't know what I'm talking about, think about like the chorus riff of Hammer Smash Face, how it ends in that squeal. That's an artificial harmonic, and what they were doing here, instead of just having it be a squeal that leaps out of register so that you kind of have your focus being brought back into the riff, they're assigning it a note value, which is a cool device, and it's something you see more in Immolation's music than you see in other bands. So you are getting the platter of what Robert Vigna is, but it feels to me that he's lost the plot on how to construct a well thought out, organic sounding riff that isn't just trying to be an imitation of what the band was. But that being said, you know that it's him when you hear it. It still sounds like Immolation. It still feels like it has that command, mainly based in the cadence of how the riffs land. You still have that 6/8 on the chorus riff, where the vocals feel like they're taking the anthemic traits of what a good riff would allow. So it still has that kind of focus where the band will assign value to a riff based on the phrasal length, and then have the vocals come in over the short phrase. That's an Immolation characteristic, but it just does not feel nearly as inspired. So I don't want to end the video slighting Robert Vigna. He's one of the most important metal guitar players, and still very underrated. You don't hear a lot of people talk about him unless you're a fan of the band. But if you really want to, if you're unfamiliar with the band, and you shouldn't be if you're watching this channel, but if you're unfamiliar with them, just definitely check out their earlier works, the first 3 records, up to Unholy Cult. I think there was a dud in there in between, but Unholy Cult is very good. But yeah, this is a band that fully realizes who they are, but the fire is a little bit extinguished. And that being said, the guitar player that we're focusing on here has portrayed himself throughout every iteration of the band in a way where you could hear him, you could feel him, you know exactly who he is. And that's not something you see in modern metal. So the focus of this series of videos that I want to do is going to showcase musicians like that, real, actual musical artists, not just instrument players. So thank you for watching.